Okay.
Okay, Rohit, yes, we are live on Facebook now.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. And I want to
Okay, so
excuse
let
myself
me,
a little bit. I
I
want to
would like
excuse myself a little
Prabhuji in
bit.
group. Okay, I would like
My
to
voice
talk
is
about to
not
all the
working.
devotees. Although Mahatma Prabhu is a very renowned popular figure in ISKCON, but still for the devotees who are not aware, I will just share some introduction of Mahatma Prabhu. So His Grace Mahatma Prabhu was born in Los Angeles, California. In 1969, at the age of 19, he met Srila Prabhupada through the Bhagavad Gita as it is, and later here met Prabhupada personally in Los Angeles. In January of 1970, he moved into the temple of Berkeley, California, and shortly after received first and second initiation. He went on to do a variety of services, including book distribution, Sankirtan leader, temple president, college preaching, congregational development, and various educational projects. This has culminated in the work he does today, developing workshops, social media, online courses, and books both for the devotees as well as the general public through his company Sattva. Uh, the website is www.thesattwaway.com. He practically shows the many ways that Krishna consciousness offers solutions to today's challenges and writes and teaches in a way that resonates with devotees and people in general by helping them see life as a spiritual practice. Mahatma Prabhu is well known in his recorded and live music, most notably his recording of Brahma Samhita, but also for his workshops on essential topics such as japa, forgiveness, humility, vows, and marriage. He's now based in Alachua, Florida. He lives with his wife, Mother Janwa, and daughter, Ved Sundari,
Hare
and
Krishna.
travels about 4 months a year.
Not
So,
this year.
personally, um, I have been blessed by the association and guidance of Mahatma Prabhu since a long time. And I can say that he's one of the best counselors in ISKCON till date. He's so encouraging, he's so supportive in whatever we would like to do in Krishna consciousness. And he always will fan the spark within so that each and every devotee can grow and they can offer amazing services to Srila Prabhupada. So, whatever devotees offer as a service to Srila Prabhupada, whoever is taking guidance from Mahatma Prabhu, I think they must have experienced this, they must have felt this, that because of Prabhuji's guidance, we have been able to do something for Srila Prabhupada, and it's only because of his inspiration and mercy. And Puji is currently also a guru. He's also initiating disciples. So we are extremely fortunate and grateful. In spite of his throat infection, he was not able to speak yesterday, but somehow, because of his overflowing enthusiasm and his
Hare Krishna.
advanced consciousness, he is able to give us time and his energy in order to teach us about how to understand the teachings of Srila Prabhupada in a holistic way. Request Mahatma Prabhuji, uh,
Hare Krishna.
please take over.
Let's hope I can speak for an hour. My voice lasts. I just wanted to make one correction. The website that we're using now is for devotees is mahatmadas.com. So just my name.com, mahatmadas.com. And so um, Prema Rasa asked me to see if we could speak about understanding Srila Prabhupada within a, perhaps the best way to say it is a broader context, not in a narrow way. I just wanted to begin by reading something. And then Prema Rasa, you can also guide me because you have some ideas where you want this discussion to go. This is from a Srimad Bhagavatam class. This is June 13th, 1969 in New Vrindavan. This is on Bhagavatam 1.5.13. Prabhupada says, Narada knows his disciple. What is his position? A spiritual master knows what is the condition, just like a physician knows. By simply feeling the beating of the pulse, an expert physician can know what is the condition of this patient, and he treats him and gives him medicine accordingly. Similarly, a spiritual master who is actually spiritual master, he knows the pulse beating of the disciple, and he therefore gives him particular kind of medicine so that he may be cured. And there's a story I think maybe many of you have heard. It's funny, but it's in line with what Prabhupada's saying here. When Prabhupada was speaking to two sannyasis, one sannyasi, he gave a general instruction that you would give to all sannyasis, that you should travel. You shouldn't stay in one place. The idea is that sannyasi, if he stays too long in one place, he could become attached. So you should always be traveling, enlightening people. The idea is stay 3 days and then move on. So he gave that instruction to one sannyasi, which is a general instruction, general principle. Then, as the story is told, immediately after he gave that instruction, he spoke to the second sannyasi, and he wanted the second sannyasi to manage the Vrindavan temple, and he told him, I want you to stay here and never leave. So apparently that sannyasi was capable as a manager. Prabhupada needed him, and therefore that was Prabhupada's desire. And so you could say, well, it seems like Prabhupada's going against the Shastra. But Prabhupada's engaging and directing his disciples according to two things: what's best for the preaching, what Prabhupada needs for the preaching, and also according to the inclination of the disciple. So this is where sometimes there's confusion, because you hear Prabhupada say something. Sue, can you turn off your microphone? Because we're hearing all the noise. Or Prima Ras, can you turn off Sue's microphone? Yeah, thank you. So sometimes there's confusion, because you'll read something that Prabhupada says and you'll think, okay, well, this is clear. But you may not understand that there's also, with some instructions, time, place, circumstance, application, which comes from knowing the philosophy more deeply and knowing Prabhupada's heart more deeply. And also from knowing how Prabhupada may have applied those same instructions in different situations. So we just have to be careful that when we understand something and we think we've clearly understood it, we may only be understanding an aspect of it that maybe relates to us or relates to a particular context. And when Prabhupada came to America, he saw things were different. iPhone, yeah, okay. Prabhupada came to America. He saw things were different. And he started making changes, which to his godbrothers seemed like he was not following proper Shastric principles. And it's interesting because he wrote about that in his books. And the thing he said is, you can't change a culture immediately. And he was referring to allowing women to join his movement, live in ashrams, do service. And he was saying the men and women, they intermingle. The women in this culture do what the men do. So we can't immediately change the culture. So he adapted. And he said, but the result is very good. So how did Prabhupada determine adaptation? Well, he determined it based on what would be the best for the individual, or what would be the best for the preaching in general. And sometimes that would go against other principles. And therefore, one of the things we learned early on was that Prabhupada was always taking into consideration how these principles would affect the people he's preaching to and what adaptations needed to be made. Now, we have a few amazing stories which kind of will shake you up a bit. Prabhupada wanted the devotees to preach in Eastern Europe, and the devotees said, Prabhupada, I don't think there's anything to eat there that's non-vegetarian. Or there's not enough, we'll have to eat meat. So Prabhupada made the shocking statement, then eat meat, if that's what you need to do. You know, like fish or chicken or something. If that's what you need to do in order to live there, okay, this preaching is so much more important. The devotee said, but what about our consciousness? We're eating meat. And Prabhupada said something very interesting. He said, damn your consciousness. And what did he mean? He meant, well, don't. This is too important. And we need to do this. And we'll make the sacrifice for the preaching. So sometimes Prabhupada would, you could say, transcend certain principles in order to adapt to the preaching. This is the most startling thing that Prabhupada said. But there, occasionally you get other things which kind of shake things up. Like one time, a devotee had written Prabhupada and said, my wife is more Krishna conscious than I am. And Prabhupada said, then listen to her, take instruction from her. Because Prabhupada was practical. He always saw that the main thing is we have to practically apply Krishna consciousness. So he wasn't attached to strictly following something if it wasn't working. And we may not by nature be that way. We may have the nature where we're very strict, and even if something doesn't work well for somebody, we may still tell them, do this, even though it's not working, because we think, well, this is the principle. Now, in some cases, yes, you can't adapt principles. They're not adaptable. But in many cases, they are adaptable. And so we see that Prabhupada was, he was learning as he was going on, because Western culture was so different. He was learning about the people. He was seeing what the culture is like and learning how to adapt accordingly. And also adapting to the advancement of his devotees, because sometimes he gave an instruction solely because a devotee couldn't follow anything higher. So he saw that, well, this is all they can do. So I'm not going to give them an instruction they can't follow. So we have one well-known example of a devotee who wrote to Prabhupada saying, I want to remarry. At that point, I don't know if he was still married, or if it was, I want to divorce and remarry, which is even worse. But he may have already been divorced. But I get the impression he wanted to divorce and remarry, which is, obviously not something Prabhupada would approve of. And if you study Prabhupada's books, there'd be no indication he would approve of it. And he approved of it, which was quite a shock to his personal servant, who asked him, why did you approve? And Prabhupada said something interesting. He said, by reading his letter, I could tell that he was going to remarry no matter what I said. And if I tell him not to remarry, he's going to remarry anyway. And thereby he will disobey my order. And so the worst thing is for the disciple to disobey the order of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada, being kind and merciful, decided not to give that order so that his disciple wouldn't have to break his order. That's really interesting. Or another example. These are things I think that are important, especially for Indians to understand, because although now your culture is being westernized, but traditionally divorce was strongly frowned upon or illegal. 1968, one of Prabhupada's disciples left her husband and went off with another boy. So now it's her boyfriend. And of course, Prabhupada had asked her to go back with her husband. Somehow or other, she wasn't going back with him. She didn't want to. And when Prabhupada saw that, she had a responsible position of service, and he said, okay, if you can't go back with your husband, then with your boyfriend, continue the service. That's pretty liberal, right? So Prabhupada was, his idea was if you engage in devotional service, you become purified. And that's why when a sannyasi fell down, which is considered worse than worse, he would forgive them and say, well, get married and continue your service. Because by doing service, they would become purified. So Prabhupada's like the doctor who's, as he said, feeling the pulse. And, if you have a weak digestive system, then the doctor has to consider when he's giving you medicine, if you can even stomach the medicine. Maybe he has the right medicine, but he knows if you take it, you're just going to get diarrhea or get an allergic reaction. So Prabhupada was careful like that he wouldn't cause any allergic reactions with his instructions. Interesting, isn't it? So we see a kind of pattern here, and where Prabhupada's operating principle was, well, what will help devotees? Now, someone could say, well, he wasn't always like that, and he was strict, and 16 rounds, 4 principles like that. Yeah, that's true. But he didn't make people feel guilty if they weren't following. He wanted them to follow. He instructed them to follow. But he didn't make people feel guilty, unaccepted, unworthy of devotional service, and so forth. And I think sometimes if we're not careful, we can make ourselves feel that way, and we can make others feel that way. Because sometimes we become more strict than Prabhupada. Prabhupada had he had a lenient side, which he carefully administered. It wasn't the general instruction he would give from Vyasa-san, but in dealing with people personally, he had that leniency, adaptability based on what would be best for the devotee. So I think that's important to understand. So whenever you understand an instruction, this is how it is, it may not always be how it is to everybody. Not everyone will see it that way, not everyone will apply it, or not everyone can apply it that way. So the instruction is good if you can apply it, but if you can't apply it, if you can't take the medicine, then what's the use of the medicine? So we have to give you a milder dose to take this medicine instead of this one pill once a day, this very powerful medicine. Well, we'll give you these other pills so you can take this other pill, less dosage, maybe 3 times a day. And then that way you'll be able to digest it. Now, another topic I want to talk about, which is, I think, extremely important. And you can ask questions in the chat if you like. And Premarasa, you can, if you want to guide me in a particular direction to take this discussion in any way, feel free to just jump in. I heard a horrible story yesterday, and I almost don't want to tell it, but I think it's important to tell it because it demonstrates a point, and a very important point. And that is the point of immaturity, which results in a misunderstanding of what Prabhupada said, and then a misapplication, and sometimes forcing people to follow an instruction or do something which is not really the right understanding, right? So we had many examples of this in the early days because we were very immature, young, immature, and spiritually immature, and maybe a bit stupid also. So I heard this horrible story. Now, it's very sad that this happened. Not widespread, but it did happen. So you may have heard this shloka by Jamuna Acharya that Prabhupada often quotes. And Jamuna Acharya was a king then he became a devotee, and he renounced that luxurious life as a king. Kings, kings in India, kings anywhere, they live quite a luxurious life, isn't it? And they have lots of sense gratification, lots of women, and so forth. So Jumalacharya was reflecting on the pleasure he was getting in Krishna consciousness. And he said, this pleasure is so, it's so deep, it's so profound, that sometimes when my mind remembers what I was doing before I was a devotee with these illicit relationships with women, I spit at the thought, which means spit at the thought in distaste. It's like if you were, let's say you were a criminal before you were a devotee, and you were just around the temple, and that thought came to your mind that you had a knife in front of an innocent woman and stole her purse, and you think, oh my God, I did that. Your face would be like this. It would be like a bitter thought, right? I can't believe I did that. I was so bad. And it's almost like, ooh, you like want to spit on it. That's what it means. I spit on the thought. The thought is so bitter that I want to spit on it. So he was remembering his affairs with women. And now that he's a devotee and he's relishing Krishna consciousness, and now that he's purified, when he thinks about it, it's so distasteful. It's like, I want to spit on the thought, just like, ooh, what a horrible thing I did. Right. So what happened early in the movement was that immature men who obviously were very attracted to women, but who were trying through the process of repulsion to remain detached, would actually spit on women. That's how they interpreted this. Now, you're hearing this and thinking, well, they were just stupid and they were just young. And that's true. However, I've heard devotees interpret things Prabhupada said that, to my mind, are as foolish as someone spitting on a woman who hears this verse. And so this is the challenge that we all face. We're coming from a background, most of us, where we're not cultured. We don't understand the Vedas. We're unqualified to understand the Vedas. By Prabhupada's mercy, he gives us the highest literature, the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're totally unqualified to understand it. And so we're very prone to misunderstanding, and maybe more prone to misapplication than misunderstanding. So, there's history of how women were not always treated well in ISKCON. And so it's like, if you read Prabhupada's books, and you think, well, how could they understand from reading his books that they should be mistreated? You'll find it hard to understand. But they hold on to something, or they get an idea in their head, they add 2 and 2 and they come up with 5, because they're not qualified. They're immature. So we have to be very careful, because we're not all that qualified. And so before you jump to some crazy conclusion, just consider, am I understanding this correctly? And the actions I would take based on my understanding, are they Krishna conscious, or do they seem a little bit unbalanced or ungrounded, or not grounded? I think that's an important question. And there's one thing I observed about Prabhupada, and I observed this personally because I had the fortune of being in Los Angeles at the time Prabhupada came there for 3 months. He was once there 7 months. I wasn't there at that time. That's when I got initiated, but I didn't live there. But the next time he came, he stayed for 3 months. That was in 1972, and I lived there. So that means I got to hear Prabhupada give Bhagavatam class every day for 3 months. And you're all thinking, oh, you're so fortunate. Yeah, you're right. I was so fortunate. I still am fortunate. And by listening to Prabhupada every day give Bhagavatam class, you start to see certain patterns. And I started to notice there's a pattern of balance. Because some things in the Shastra seem black and white. It's just, this is how it is. But it's not always like that. There's usually another side to it. And I noticed that either by the end of that class or in the class the following day, Prabhupada tended to bring in the other side. And the class or the verse was describing one side, and he tended to bring in the other side. That maybe the class is about brahmachari life. So he's, grihastha life, deep well, covered by grass. You'll never get out. Etc. Those there we have verses like that. Of course, it's talking about materialistic grihastha life. Brahmachari life is better, and so on and so forth. So Bhagavatam talks like that, and you can't make believe it doesn't say those things. It says those things, and if that's the verse that you're giving the lecture on, that's what you talk about. You talk about the pitfalls, the glories of brahmachari life, renounced life, and the pitfalls of grihastha life, because that's what the verse is about. And so sometimes I was present when Prabhupada spoke on those verses. And then usually by the end of the class, and he'd say, well, but if you can't be brahmachari, then Krishna conscious grihastha life is just as good. And all of a sudden, the balance came, right? Okay, that's one side of the story, which applies to those who have the intelligence, the samskars, the ability to live a life as a single man or a single woman. But then, as we see, at least in the West, majority of men, majority of women feel they need to be married. That will be the best ashram for them. So then Prabhupada said, so then he paints the picture. Okay, but if you're going to be grihastha, then you do it like this, and it's just as good. There won't be any impediment. Now, maybe you've seen this, maybe you've done this yourself, where you've gone to the class and you heard one side, but you didn't hear the other side. So it gives a perspective of Prabhupada which is not balanced, because that's not the only thing Prabhupada said about it. So it's something to be careful about, especially if you're going to be explaining things to people, or you're a Bhakti Vriksha leader, or you're explaining things to your friends. You want to have the whole picture, because brahmachari life is just one ashram. So if you're going to talk about brahmachari life, you also have to talk about grihastha life, because some people want to be grihasthas. And if you don't, and if you just put it down, it doesn't work. It's lopsided preaching. It's not relatable. Let me try to think of other examples. Oh yeah, here's a good one. We did this. We were guilty of this a lot when we were younger. I mean, I think it's also part of being young is one of the qualifications of being young is being stupid, but in some ways stupid, inexperienced. But I think the challenge was that we were slow learners of Krishna consciousness, and especially in application. So it was quite common for devotees to steal flowers from neighbors, from parks. We even heard sometimes devotees would go into these stores at the gas station, and one devotee would speak to the guy behind the counter and distract him, and another devotee would fill the bag up with groceries. Because after all, everything belongs to Krishna. If everything belongs to Krishna, and we're using it for Krishna, we should just take it, right? We shouldn't have to pay for it. And in those days, when you get gas, you pump gas and then you pay afterwards, right? And so oftentimes devotees would get the gas and they'd park their van in a way where the guy in the store couldn't really see that they were pumping gas. And when the gas was pumped, they would just all jump in the van and leave and wouldn't pay for it. And there was no register inside. And by the time the guy comes out, the van's gone. And devotees were thinking, well, of course we should do this. Why should we waste Krishna's money? Everything belongs to Krishna. Okay, everything belongs to Krishna. Nobody's going to doubt that. But Krishna does give things for people to take care of. It's theirs to use, and it's not ours to take from. But that part we didn't understand. Now, you're listening to this and thinking, oh, you were so stupid. How could you not understand this? There's probably something right now in our philosophy you're not understanding well that someone might think. How could you not understand that? So I don't think it's a isolated problem of a bunch of 20-year-olds in 1970. I still see it today in application, in ways which sometimes are unhealthy. So a devotee is being mistreated by another devotee. Oh, it's just Krishna's mercy, Prabhu, and just tolerate it. Yes, in some cases, yes, that's true. But in some cases, it's destroying the devotee. It's destroying their spiritual life, or it's destroying their emotional life, or destroying their health. How could that be right? Isn't it? Some of you may be aware of some of the problems we had in raising children. Teachers were very strict because they thought Krishna consciousness is strict. And it's kind of like they were expecting the students to follow principles like adults. And some of the teachers were not sympathetic to the fact that kids can't follow that way. And if you look back at it, it's another one of those, how could they think that way? What was wrong with them? What was wrong is that we get an instruction in our mind and we don't have a balanced and mature view of application. And then we get, you could say, a fanatic or a narrow, or just a misunderstood the point in the first place, or misunderstood the application. And it always has bad effects. Sometimes it has divisive effects, and we argue. We argue over something. This is right, this is right. And then Prabhupada said, sometimes the acharyas disagree, and we have to make room for both being right, even though they're different, which is an interesting idea, which can be accommodated in the spiritual dimension, because spiritual dimension is beyond three dimensions. How can you have two different opinions both being right? Well, Krishna is unlimited. But more so, one of the things that I've seen, it's something we should become aware of. Something may be right for me, but it's not right for you. Like, maybe I'm qualified to do 64 rounds a day. And if I say, well, you should do 64 rounds a day because I do 64 rounds and it's revolutionized my life. And if you do 64 rounds a day, you don't have the time, you don't have the qualification. And probably those rounds would be quite offensive because you would just be distracted and you're just not settled. So what works for me may not work for you. And so sometimes because something works for us, we think, well, it works for everybody. Like, for example, I go out, I distribute books, and I get so inspired. And I go out and give a class, I get so inspired, and I think everyone should go on books. Everyone should, or I go on Harinam Sankirtan. Everyone should go on Harinam Sankirtan. It's so purifying. And if you ask me to manage a temple, to me that's boring. I don't really like it. But if you ask another devotee to manage a temple, he's very inspired. You ask him to go on Sankirtan, oh, I don't like dealing with people like that. So his subjective experience of management is very inspiring. My subjective experience of management is kind of, what's the opposite of not inspiring? It kind of just, boring. Yeah, for me, it's not interesting, not inspiring. It's kind of boring and taxing my brain because my brain works differently. So sometimes we run into this problem where what works for us, we make it global and think, well, this is an absolute principle. because, our Prabhupada said, go on Sankirtan, it's the most purifying. So I go on Sankirtan, it's the most purifying. I feel that. And I think, okay, this is for everybody. But in fact, some devotees can't do it. Some devotees are just, they would be much more Krishna conscious in another service. It's not, they're not capable, they're not able, whatever. Oh, they can do it sometimes. But to do it every day as a service, it's not something that everybody could do, especially for the rest of their life. But maybe I could do it the rest of my life. This is my life and soul. This is what I do. And so I globalize it, and I think, well, this instruction, if you're not following it, there's something wrong with you, and you should follow it, because here's Prabhupada said this, and this is my realization. Some devotees will have that realization with deity worship. Some devotees will have that realization with studying Prabhupada's books and teaching. Some devotees will have that realization with learning shlokas. It just lights them up. Then another devotee will say, yeah, I have no memory, I can't learn shlokas. I'm not good at languages. So that's where that becomes a problem, is it can create division, because you think, oh, this devotee there's something wrong with them because they're not doing book distribution, or they're not doing this. It's just a different nature. And where it really becomes bad is when we give a class and we say, okay, everybody should do this. But that what everybody should do is not necessarily suited for everybody. It's just what inspires you. Everyone, you should learn 10 shlokas a day, because since I've been learning 10 shlokas a day, my spiritual life has completely changed, And I can learn 10 shlokas in 10 minutes. And if you have to learn 10 shlokas, it'll take you 10 hours. I don't think that's going to transform your life. I think your whole life's going to fall apart if you have to spend 10 hours on learning 10 shlokas. I'm sure for some people it would take 10 hours to learn that, wouldn't it? Like, not everybody has a great memory. So I get so inspired by learning shlokas, and I give a class, and you should all learn shlokas. This will inspire you. It's the most important thing. And obviously it's purifying. Obviously, whatever is purifying you and inspiring you is purifying and inspiring. It's just not necessarily purifying, inspiring to everyone to the same degree that you do it, or even at all with some services. So we saw, like, some devotees love India. Some, once they went to India, they said, I'm never coming back in my life again. I never want to see it. They got so sick and frustrated in dealing with, things in the early 70s. They never came back. And some devotees never left. So does it matter if you don't live in India? Are you better because, something wrong? You don't like India? You can't be a devotee? Somebody could argue like that. But from a practical perspective, we're different. And so this is where I see a big problem. When we're globalizing something, that means that this is for everybody, and not explaining, well, for me, this works. My understanding is this. There may be other understandings. I'm not the only one thinking about this, right? What's your understanding about this? My understanding is this. I know other devotees understand it differently. This is why I see it this way. You may want to understand why they see it. Because we're individuals. Prabhupada said, because we're individuals, there's going to be diversity. It's the nature. The fact that we're different is testimony to the reality of diversity. We're going to disagree. So I think that's a good starting point, Premarasa. You want to direct me now, or are there questions that you would like to ask? I think you had some specific ideas where you wanted to take this conversation, or maybe some misunderstandings devotees have in this topic, in this area.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for such a wonderful insight into understanding Prabhupada holistically. And so, Prabhuji, one question I had is, so we do understand that every devotee is different, and individuality is there in the spiritual world also. So that aspect is always there. But at the same time, Prabhupada has also given a common vision and a mission to everyone,
Yes.
which is like preaching. So
Yes.
many times Prabhupada said that, and he has practically demonstrated by his own example that he engaged different devotees in different areas of preaching.
Yes.
Yeah. So what generally we see in India, especially the trend is that uh, devotees, I think they are not aware that what talent and ability they have, and that
Mm.
ability they can engage in preaching.
Yes.
But because and due to this, what happens is they start focusing more on chanting and on their sadhana
Mm-hmm.
rather than also thinking about offering some practical service.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
what do you have to suggest about that?
Well, I can give you a little history of ISKCON in context. As you probably know, Prabhupada traveled a lot, and wherever he went, he was very busy and he did a lot, and it was all based on spreading Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada used to tell us we should be engaged 24 hours a day, and engaged in doing what? Doing something that's going to help the Krishna consciousness movement expand. And he also said we should strain our brains in thinking how we can reach more people with Krishna consciousness, new ways, different ways, innovative ways. So the training we got from Srila Prabhupada was that your sadhana, that's what you do in the morning. Then Prabhupada said 9 to 5 are banking hours. Banking hours meaning that's when the world is open and doing business. That's when we're doing our service. And then again in the evening, we hear and chant. So we used to call this the ISKCON sandwich. So morning and evening, hearing and chanting, we strengthen our spiritual lives. And then during the day, we are actively engaged in spreading Krishna consciousness and straining our brain. Now, if you're working, then obviously it's a little different. Then your evenings you have time, your weekends you have time. What I have found, there's two things that I have found which are important to note. I have engaged devotees in some service, just things they could do on the computer, for example, or some research, or some editing, or some video editing, or writing something, to help me with what I'm doing. And what I've noticed, and I've noticed it because they've told me, is that they had this time that they could have used for service, but they didn't have any service, or they couldn't conceive of any service. So when I gave them service, they said it made such a difference, because otherwise I would just like sit around and watch television or just talk or Facebook or whatever, with free time. But the preacher, the one who's actively engaged in devotional service, they don't really have free time, because whatever free time they have, they want to use that. So these devotees would say, this is really, it's engaging me and it's inspiring me, because instead of just coming home with nothing, now I have devotional service right at my home, which is even more relevant now with COVID, because some of us are always at home. The other thing that I've seen, and I think this is the point you were alluding to even more so, is that Krishna has endowed all of us with specific talents, aptitudes. If you ever listen to a TED Talk, usually it's professors or people with degrees who've studied the topic well. And usually it's people who have an aptitude for that particular discipline, whatever it is that they're speaking about. They have a natural aptitude for it. And so it comes very easy to them. Whatever they're teaching, whether it's public speaking, quantum physics, psychology, organizational development, and on the corporate level, marketing, whatever, you can see that the experts in that field, their minds they're just ramped up to perfectly understand and apply that particular topic. We understand this with business people. Why does two people see the same opportunity, but actually one doesn't see it, and they're wired different. One person sees an opportunity, but he sees it from a different perspective. His mind is wired differently. He's an engineer. He sees the world from how everything is constructed. A psychologist sees the world from how people interact psychologically, emotionally. A Vaishya, a businessman, sees opportunity to create a new business when he sees a situation. Scientists see things in a scientific way. So we all have that particular nature. We're all good at something. And we're all bad at something, right? So what I've found is that when devotees connect with what they're good at, what their nature is, what they like to do, and they engage in that service, they become very inspired. Like let's say you're a writer. You know, if you're a writer, writing is inspiring. It's something you do very easily and naturally. If you're a musician, singing or playing your instrument, it's very natural, very easy. Yeah, sometimes you never see like incredible writers, incredible artists, incredible musicians, and you look at their art and you think, how do they do that? That's incredible. But for them, it's not really difficult. You know, you can play the piano like average, and they can play it like an expert. But for them, it's just as easy to play like an expert because that's how their mind is wired. That's the gifts they have, the samskars. So when you engage those gifts and samskars, you become incredibly inspired. And then Prabhupada said, with that inspiration comes more inspiration to follow sadhana. But sadhana is really to give the purity and the inspiration to go out and do something to help people become Krishna conscious, directly or indirectly. Directly means you can go directly with a book, you can talk, organize a program, or indirectly, you can be in the background doing accounting, doing management, editing a book, and so forth, not necessarily directly with people. But when you find that, and we have a course on my website, it's on my SoundCloud, I believe it's called Finding Your Dharma in Prabhupada's Mission. And there's a worksheet that goes with that course that you can get on my website. So that may be useful if you're not sure what you should do. But, you know, when you can use your creativity, your inspiration, your nature in Krishna service, you can become extremely inspired. And if you feel you lack inspiration, this may be the very reason you lack it. But the way Prabhupada gave sadhana, he gave it as a means for becoming strong so we could go out and fight with Maya. Not like, you know, just eat all day and exercise all day. No, that was not his mission. And then Prabhupada told us stories about some of his godbrothers who just wanted to chant 64 rounds. And they could do it, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted them to go out and preach. He wasn't happy with that. He didn't approve. And sometimes he told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, apparently had told Prabhupada, you know, engage these godbrothers in preaching, encourage them, get them out there. That's what he wanted them to do. And if that's what Prabhupada wants us to do, that's how you'll make the most advancement. You know, it's like if Prabhupada, let's say you chant 64 rounds a day, but Prabhupada doesn't want you to do that. Then it's not going to help you make advancement because with every round over 16, you're disobeying Prabhupada. You know, once a devotee wrote Prabhupada that I'm chanting 25 rounds. And Prabhupada said, well, first chant 16 nicely. Prabhupada wasn't so excited. I guess he understood this devotee was not chanting well and didn't think it was a great credit to chant more bad rounds. But let's say your spiritual master says, okay, very good, chant 25. That's nice. Okay, you do it. And you say, Guru Maharaj, can I chant 32? And he said, no, I want you to preach. So then everything over 25 is disobedience to your Guru, even though you're chanting Hare Krishna. So I think we should see sadhana like that, you know, sufficient sadhana to give us the strength to do some service, to help spread Krishna consciousness. And we're the hands and feet for Srila Prabhupada. He came alone. And now he gave us this amazing mission. And now we're going to take this mission and we're going to make the world Krishna conscious. And the last thing I want to say about this, or at least I like to share this with all of you. Maybe some of you or all of you already have this experience, but It's exciting spreading Krishna consciousness, and it's fun. And, so many times I've thought, all the things that I'm doing, teaching, traveling, writing, kirtan, making music and so forth, I thought, if I was just doing this on some mundane level, even though it's my nature, it would not be exciting. Or at least not nearly as exciting as creating a revolution in the world, changing the face of the planet. That's what we're actually doing. And if you see that's what's happening, it's very inspiring to see that you can contribute to changing the world. And you might think, oh, the world is in such a mess, how are we changing it? But we may not see it. Just like if you're building a cathedral, you're just putting brick upon brick. You don't see the cathedral, but if you continue, you'll see it. Is that okay, Premarasa? Or you want to ask something else about this? Or you have another question?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Excellent insight into that. Uh, I think we have a question from Varshana Gram Mataji. So she has already posted in the chat box. Sometimes you see that some devotees like a particular type of service, but he's not good at it. And when he tries to learn it, he does not succeed.
Yes.
But even so, that devotee focuses on putting his attention on that service and at the same time neglects the services that he is doing for. How can we handle this?
Neglects the services what services? The services he's asked to do? Are you saying he does what he wants and he neglects what he's asked to do? Is that what you're saying?
Varshana Gram Mataji, can you put your question towards Prabhu?
Where is she? We need you to ask your question. Or is it in the chat? Can I read it? It's in the chat, right?
Yes,
I can read it.
There in the chat box.
Okay, let me read it. Sometimes we see that some devotee likes a particular type of service, but he is not good at it, and when he tries to learn it, he does not succeed. But even so, that devotee focuses on putting his attention on that service, and at the same time neglects the services that he is good for. How can we handle this? Well, it seems to me the only reason he would do that is because he's being asked to do those services. Those services are necessary. And even though he's not good at it, there's the temple needs him to do it, or the community needs him to do it. And in that case, then, as Prabhupada would often say, well, if you're trying, then it's successful. That's all you can do. You're trying. I wouldn't say, well, if a devotee says, I like this service and I don't like this, so the best thing for my Krishna consciousness would be to do something I don't like. Because doing something you do like, it's not sense gratification. Don't look at it that way. It's just like Arjuna, he's a Kshatriya. That's his swabhav, that's his nature. So Krishna's saying, act according to your nature. So to avoid acting according to your nature would be against what Krishna taught Arjuna. So that's only necessary if we're asked to do that service. But if we have a choice, or we're asked to do a service according to our nature, it's something that we like, don't think of it as sense gratification. Just think of it as like, here's a resource I have. I have a certain ability, I have a certain intelligence. This is a resource I have, and so I can use that resource for Krishna. So why shouldn't I use it? Like, I think probably of all my talents, the one that comes easiest to me is speaking. Writing is much more difficult for me. And I'm okay as a musician, but I don't think I would ever win a Grammy Award. I'm not that good. Someone might say, no, you are. No, but, not really. But speaking is something, and counseling is something that comes very easily to me. I can conceptualize, I can get ideas out, I can help people understand. And so to think, well, because I like it, I shouldn't do it. No, because I like it and and I feel I'm good at it and I can do it, that's good for the students who hear it. So to not do it in the name of I like it would be bad for the students. And to not do it in the name that I like it would be like I give you $1 million, so now you have this resource and you decide, I'm not going to spend it because I could spend it on sense gratification, so I'm just going to leave it in the bank. No, here's $1 million I've given you to spend for Krishna. So if you can spend it for Krishna, we can build a temple, or we can publish so many books, whatever. So your ability, your intelligence, it's a resource. It's like money. So to not use it is just like keeping money in the bank. And if you use it in Krishna's service, it's service. It's not sense gratification. You're not doing it for sense gratification. You're not doing. I don't teach so people will think I'm great. I don't teach so I can become a Nobel laureate or make a lot of money. I teach so I can help devotees become Krishna conscious. That's why I do it. I like doing it. Comes easy. So the motive is good. If the motive is good, then doing what you like will never be sense gratification. It'll just be a bonus, because if you like doing something, you get energy doing it, and you do it well, and you could do it day in and day out. And if that service is valuable and needed, why not? You know, sometimes I will go to a temple, before COVID, and I like to do workshops like all weekend, because I like to focus on one topic so you can go very deeply into it, like japa or forgiveness or whatever, right? And sometimes, this happens sometimes, believe it or not, the workshop is like 10 to 6. And they'll say, well, could you give Bhagavatam class? And we have an evening program. Can you go to somebody's house? So sometimes we'll do Mangal Arti and chant our rounds and do Bhagavatam class, and that'll end like 9. The seminar starts at 10. We'll end at 6, and then we'll get in the car, and we'll go to a home program, and they usually end like 10 o'clock or something. And someone will say, aren't you tired? I'll say, no, I like doing this. It doesn't make me tired because I like it. So that's just an advantage for me that I can do that. I think the students are more tired than I am. They're looking at me thinking I'm tired, and that's making them tired. But when you like something, you don't get tired. So why not take advantage of that? So I think that's what you're asking. I think that's what you're asking. But if that's not what you're asking, if I didn't cover it, then just ask again for more details. Alicia, you still in London, or you ended up back in Mumbai? No, you must still be in London, right? In your new house, which is not so new. She has a new house. It's just not a new house. Sometimes we say, I got a new car. Well, really? Yeah, it's 10 years old, but it's new for me. Yeah. Because she's asking, we recently hear a lot about devotee care. What are your views on it? And any incidents that Srila Prabhupada spoke about it? Yeah, well, there's one incident that stands out, has always stood out in my mind. Devotee was trying to save money. And in order to do that, the prasadam he was offering the devotees was, I don't even know if you could call it prasadam, because I don't want to make an offense to prasadam. But it was so bad that Prabhupada severely chastised him. Devotees were like hungry. They couldn't eat it. It was just horrible. Prabhupada was so upset. Devotee said, I'm trying to save money, Prabhupada. And basically Prabhupada said, you think it's my desire that devotees suffer like this so that we can save money? There's another, these are physical things. There's another time I was in the class, as far as I remember, and some devotees were coughing, and Prabhupada stopped, and he turned to the temple president of GBC and said, why are they coughing? Don't they have warm clothes? You should make sure they have warm clothes. So this is on a physical level. Another godbrother had, banged his toe or something, and Prabhupada saw it, and he said, Prabhupada was really concerned. Like, what can I do? How can I help you? So I think if you look at Prabhupada's translation of his books, I think that's one of the most outstanding aspects of Prabhupada's care. And then you look at Prabhupada traveling, and traveling is difficult. Traveling around the world through time zones. I have experience, and anyone who's done this will tell you, it really drains. It's a real drain on the body. When you hear, oh, if I tell someone I'm traveling around the world, they're like, oh, you're so lucky. And yeah, maybe for a few weeks, but after that, it's really hard on the body, hard on the mind. Like now during COVID, I'm just so regular. Things that I couldn't regularly do, I do all the time because everything is in one place. It's right here. It's not moving, getting packed up, going somewhere else, unpacked. Can't take everything with me, get off schedule, forget to do something in my routine. So Prabhupada said, when he was asked why he's traveling, he said, I'm traveling to protect my devotees, to take care of them, to make sure they're strong. So I think what we all felt in Prabhupada's presence was that he just wanted us to be happy and go back to Godhead, and that he arranged ISKCON for that purpose. He was doing everything he could for that purpose. He wanted his leaders to do everything they could for that purpose. But there's another aspect of devotee care that I think maybe is being neglected to some degree that we should talk about. And that's called self-care. You're a devotee. Do you care for yourself? If we talk about self-care, it's like, oh, that's just like selfish. No, but if you're a devotee and we're talking about devotee care, then if you care for yourself, you're caring for a devotee, so that's part of devotee care, right? Why would caring for yourself be sense gratification if you care for yourself so you can do devotional service? It would only be sense gratification if the care you give yourself is employed in sense gratification, which hopefully for all of us it isn't. There's another aspect of self-care, devotee care, that I often talk about, which I think is really important. And I would like to see an ISKCON, anything I can do to create an ISKCON, help create an ISKCON, where devotees are a little more vulnerable, a little more open, and less judgmental. In other words, create an environment where we can be vulnerable without being judged. Because in order for us to all progress in Krishna consciousness, we have to be able to be open. We have to talk about our problems. And we have to be able to do it with people who won't judge us, condemn us, make us feel guilty, make us feel bad. Because by nature, when we are not perfect in Krishna consciousness, we feel bad. I should be better. My Guru Maharaj would want me to be better. We naturally feel bad. So I already feel bad. Now, if other devotees are making me feel bad, that's like pouring salt on the wound. But if I can open up and a devotee says, well, I see you're sincere. I see you're trying. Maybe I can help you with these strategies or this understanding or give you this association. Or they say, this is normal what you're going through. We all go through this. And as long as you're sincere, as long as you're trying, you'll be successful. And that's extremely helpful. Whereas if I condemn that person, it shuts them down, it makes them feel worse. They don't want to open up. So opening up is an important part of devotee care, creating an environment that they can open up. And recently I've been having some discussions, or maybe observing discussions, about something that has concerned me for many years, and it has kind of put me in a direction in the service of what I teach. But more and more the leaders who are dealing with the devotee care are seeing that in this generation now, people are growing up in very dysfunctional environments. Many people are growing up in dysfunctional environments. And so when they become devotees, as we say in America, they bring a lot of baggage. There's a lot of stuff that could be unhealthy things in their past. Samskars, whatever you want to call them, psychology, emotional baggage that they need to clear out. And so part of devotee care may, for some devotees, entail clearing that stuff out. Past traumas, whatever. I had a godbrother. He was a medic in Vietnam, and the Vietnam War was horrible, and he was not normal. I mean, he was normal, but not entirely. We could tell. It was like he was a little different. He was traumatized. And he never, we never had anything in ISKCON or anyone with a vision to say, he should have some trauma counseling. We need to help him. No one ever gave him that, which I think he needs or needed or still needs. So, but some people are traumatized by life, the way they were raised, or the way they were treated, and then become devotees, and then sometimes that can create problems in their relationships, and their own determination, and their own sense of feeling, does Krishna even love me? Things like that. So I think that's part of the devotee care aspect. It has to, we have to go to the physical, the emotional, as well as the spiritual. And one other aspect of devotee care, and this has come up over the years. I've seen this again and again. It's like you have a sangha, and then after some time, some devotee or some devotees stop coming to the sangha, and nobody contacts them. Nobody says anything. How are you doing? We haven't seen you, and so forth. So they kind of slip away from the family, so to speak, and nobody contacts them. So I think that's important when you have a sangha, or just you haven't seen someone at the temple for a while. Contact them. Say, what's going on? We haven't seen you. How are you? Are you okay? I think that's important. I'm sure I could talk for 5 hours on this topic, but those are some things that come to mind. Anuradha. Is that the next question? Anuradha, let me go down. Okay. After Alicia, Anuradha, when we deal with material people, we have to face anger, fights, and in their association we act like that. But as devotees, we should be tolerant and calm. So how should we manage when we're dealing with material people? Can housewives or devotees who do their sadhana don't preach, can they go back to Godhead? You can preach to your neighbors, You can make cookies and give them out in the neighborhood. You can always do something. Yeah, you can go back to Godhead, don't worry. Your kids will take you back to Godhead when they become pure devotees. So, your first question. Yeah, well, if you help your husband and your kids become Krishna conscious, that's your preaching. So your first question, it's interesting you asked this, because recently, I don't know if you have this experience, but sometimes you're thinking about something or something just comes up, and a certain topic keeps coming up all the time. Like wherever you look, somebody does a Facebook post, and then you read something in Prabhupada. It's like about the same thing. Then you listen to a Prabhupada memory, and it's about the same thing. So recently, for whatever reason, the topic of tolerance has been coming up a lot. And I never realized how much Prabhupada emphasized tolerance. And I heard this amazing story, which I think will answer your question. There was one devotee was, according to her, was being mistreated by the men. And she was very angry. And she had a close relationship with Prabhupada, so she was in Vrindavan, Prabhupada was there, and she could approach him. She started complaining about how the men were treating her, and Prabhupada was very upset. Not with the men, although that's another story. I don't know the details, but he was upset because she wasn't tolerating it. I mean, the men may have been doing something wrong, but he wanted to teach her the lesson of tolerance. He got so angry with her. And he told her, you have to tolerate. She said, I never saw him so angry before. So, what I learned from this is that tolerance is extremely important. And when Prabhupada saw her not being tolerant, he was really upset because he saw this as a failing, like a huge failing. And then he said something heavy, which convinces me that what I'm saying is correct. He said to her, unless you become tolerant, you can't go back to Godhead. So he saw intolerance as this major stumbling block that you have to, you're not a Pisunichena, you have to learn tolerance to go back to Krishna. That's just what you have to do. So, and you can read so many things Prabhupada said about tolerance. He said tolerance is, this is how you judge I forget how he said it, the character of a person is by how much they can tolerate. That's how you can understand or evaluate the character of a person by their level of tolerance. And sometimes tolerance is equated with forgiveness. And sometimes Prabhupada says that forgiveness is the first quality of a devotee. And sometimes tolerance is equated with humility, and humility is the first item of knowledge. And humility, if you actually study the topic of humility, humility is almost a synonym of prema, because where there's prema, there's humility. It's like you're not going to get prema if you have no humility. So it's a symptom, but also Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it's an integral part of prema. It's a symptom of prema, but it's what prema is made out of. So I like to think of pride as kind of like the enemy to bhakti. And I like to think of humility as when you have humility, you've arrived, you've reached Krishna prema, because without humility, you'll never get Krishna prema. And when you get Krishna prema, it's because you have humility. And if you don't have humility, as Prabhupada said, how are you going to go back to Godhead? So, inherent in the idea of tolerance is it's just somehow or other we have to tolerate it. And I think one of the ways we learn to tolerate is simply because Krishna asks us to. Prabhupada asks us to. Like, how do you tolerate this? I don't know, Prabhu, but Prabhupada wants us to tolerate it. We have to. I mean, when you become a devotee, there's so many things you have to tolerate, not just other people, but your own mind, your own senses. The environment that you're in that's inviting you to give up Krishna consciousness, you have to tolerate that. All the people, sometimes you see videos of horrible things that are going on in the world, and it's so sad, it's so depressing. It's just like you want to hide. We have to be able to somehow or other face the world in spite of this, and not lose our enthusiasm to be Krishna conscious and spread it. So tolerance it's just, when you understand it's fundamental to your practice of bhakti, it's just you have to do it. You could ask how, but that's the best answer I can give, is you just have to, because that's how you'll become Krishna conscious. So, if that didn't completely answer anyone's question, just please ask for further clarification. And until then, if Prema Rasa, you have anything else? I'm hoping my voice gets better by using it, but that kind of goes against medical science, right? You should get worse by using it. It's always worse in the morning when I wake up, and I haven't used it for 6, 7, 8 hours, so I'm working against that philosophy. Using it, when you're singing, you warm up by using your voice. So I think it's actually better now than when I started. I was telling my wife a story. When I was a new devotee, this was very early on, maybe 3 months after I became a devotee, I got really, really sick. Cold showers, not sleeping enough. Came down with some kind of flu, body aches, headaches. I went out on Sankirtan the whole day. I was in pain. It was a peace demonstration in San Francisco, and the whole day I was distributing magazines. I was talking to people about Krishna. Cold weather, bundled up. You think I'm crazy, right? When I got back, I was better. That was what cured me. So sometimes engaging in devotional service is the cure. Yeah, I think this point about tolerance, it's something we need to pay attention to. because I think what some devotees do is when they have a certain challenge in their life, like tolerance could be a challenge, envy could be a challenge, greed could be a challenge, lust could be a challenge. All of them could be challenges. But we all face at least one or more of them in a big way. That's something, it's real. This is really difficult for me. And we don't want to think that, well, I have sadhana and I'm chanting, so I won't worry about it. That may be okay to a certain degree, but we have to be aware of the destructive nature of envy, of lust, of greed, and intolerance. And so we have to consciously practice tolerance and freedom from envy and freedom, at least control it. Because if we don't, it'll destroy us. Even though we're doing the other things, it's like, you can eating a healthy diet and then you eat a gallon of ice cream. So you just destroyed all the good. So it's not that some big anartha uncontrolled can't be like an acid on our devotional creeper. It can be. And so that's something to be aware of, because otherwise we might just say, well, this is how I am. I can't control it, and I'll just keep chanting. But that's not the way Prabhupada taught us. He always taught us, no, you have to control your anger. You have to be tolerant. You try, at least try to be humble. Try to give up your lust. Try to give up your greed. You have to make this effort to a sufficient degree that it won't disturb your bhakti. Maybe we can't be perfect in the beginning, but we have to control it sufficiently. So I think that's super important to understand, at least for those devotees who may misunderstand that and think, well, at least I chant Hare Krishna, I can't control anything else. No, but you have to try. And you can control it by Krishna's grace. Pray for help. He'll help you.
I have one comment and one question also.
Okay.
So, we began with the discussion of understanding Srila Prabhupada teachings holistically, and but I think that in order to know the extreme sides of Prabhupada's teachings, we have to read his books. We have to
That
go
would
through his
help.
letters. Like, we have to understand.
Yeah. Oh, stop right here. I have a
So,
thought. I just want to share this with you. This is amazing, and then you can continue, but I don't want to forget this. I find so much value in Prabhupada's letters. And a lot of devotees say, well, the books are everything. The letters are like secondary or third on the list and so forth. Check this out. You know how important book distribution is to Srila Prabhupada, right? He mentions book distribution only 29 times in his books. In his conversations, 399 times. In his lectures, in his letters, 429 times. So this whole book distribution revolution really, and I can tell you from a bird's eye view experience, did not come from his books. It came from his conversations and his letters. That's what sparked book distribution. So nobody should minimize. They have different functions. The conversations, the letters, the lectures, they may have slightly different functions. But to say, you can just say, well, because the books are better, you don't need it. Yeah, and that's the point. You will understand through the letters how Prabhupada applied everything. That's how you see him in his letters. The letters are all how he ran the movement. He ran his movement through the letters. You'll see all the practical applications. So, Prema Rasa, excuse me for that. I just wanted to say that. You can continue, or maybe I already answered your question.
thank you so much for amazing comment. And in fact, I have the good fortune of reading Prabhupada letters for the right from 1965 to 77. So I'm like just about to finish for the second time all these letters.
Wow.
And I can actually understand what you are saying. It's actually so practical that Prabhupada said so many things. He adjusted so many things, and we can actually get a holistic picture of
Yes.
Prabhupada's teachings through the letters. Not only the letters, but in fact, recently I had also great fortune to read Prabhupada Remembrances by Siddhanta Prabhu, the diaries.
Amazing.
So there also we get another complete new dimension to Prabhupada's pastimes. And so many
Totally.
things that Prabhupada actually wrote in the books, practically he did something so different.
Yes, totally.
So it's like,
It's funny because because
yeah,
in some cases it looks like Prabhupada disobeyed his own instructions, doesn't it? I hate to say that, but sometimes the application was apparently, just the opposite of what he said. And your point is well taken. By studying all those books, you see how he applied and how flexible he was in different environments. You want to hear a funny story? This is an amazing story. I don't know if you've all heard this. My disciples have heard this. But in 1969, was coming to the temple in Berkeley. I was going to school there. And I started visiting the temple. And at the same time, there was a man who was a little older than me. I think he might have been 25. I was 19. So to me, he was quite an old guy, because at 19, 25 is kind of old, as funny as that sounds. And he was coming into the temple, and he was getting into Krishna consciousness. And when he would come to the temple, he'd wear a dhoti, saffron dhoti. And I don't know what he was doing, what his job was, but he had a lot of free time, and he was hanging out at the temple. And as a student, I had a lot of free time, and I would hang out, and I would see him there sometimes. And one day he showed up in a sari, and he was speaking like a woman. So this is Berkeley. Berkeley is a kind of a crazy place. Probably the most crazy in America, maybe the whole world, at least at that time. But still, even for us in that crazy place, it was confusing. What do we do with this person? He would come back in a dhoti, come in a sari, he would keep changing. And like, what do you tell this person? And he was chanting, I think, 16 rounds. So the temple president wrote Prabhupada. And Prabhupada either wrote the temple president or wrote this boy. And he said something amazing, which just gives you an insight into Prabhupada's flexibility, understanding of human nature, and his compassion and his willingness to adjust in a way that would help somebody. And so he told the boy, he said, if you want to be a woman, that's fine. If you want to be a man, that's fine. But don't keep changing back. Just decide what you want to be and then execute Krishna consciousness, which is almost like what you would say to a man who's thinking about getting married. Should I get married? Should I not get married? Well, just decide. Don't hover back and forth. Make a decision. Is it brahmachari or is it grihastha life? It's not good to be oscillating because it destabilizes your consciousness and your life. So that's basically what he was saying, is just, stabilize yourself and make a choice. That's amazing, isn't it? So that gives you insight into Prabhupada's, compassion for this person and his willingness to be flexible. Prabhupada engaged homosexuals. He gave some of them sannyas. No problem. They want to serve Krishna. There's no discrimination. Black people, Chinese people, Japanese people, there's no discrimination. Prabhupada went to Africa and they were preaching to the Indians. Prabhupada said, no, preach to the Africans. So he was, and you read in his books, you might get a different idea. Well, did Prabhupada really want to preach to the Africans? Did he think they were qualified? Anyone who wanted to be Krishna conscious, he was willing to help without judgment, without making any prejudicial statements that you can not become Krishna conscious because of you're a man who wants to be a woman, or you're in an African body, or whatever, Chinese or anything. So, we grew up seeing this, and we never got the impression that Prabhupada was really trying to establish rules and regulations. I always got the impression he was just trying to find ways to get people to chant Hare Krishna and engage in devotional service. That's how we grew up. That was our thought. And there's talk about Varnashram now and establishing it, but it's not that the goal is going to be different. It's engaged. Varnashram was it's just another tool to engage people in Krishna consciousness. We have a question by Anju here, and he's saying we're put in some situation as to learn and acquire certain quality. Yeah, but you have to be able to see that. Like, what is the situation teaching you? And then if you ask that question, you try to figure it out, you'll see, yeah, there's lessons everywhere. What is this? You can learn. Every day of your life, in every situation, there's a lesson there. And sometimes it takes us like our whole life to get the lesson. That's unfortunate. And what I try to do in my seminars and my books is kind of open you up to get the lesson sooner. Just so I don't forget, on Amazon.com, if you just go Amazon.com, Mahatma Das, then you can access my books there. And I have, books about practical application to try to move you faster to realize, what the lessons are, what you need to work on. Because it's a shame if you have to go 20 years and not be aware of it. Or like think you don't have a problem, but you do, but you don't want to admit it, or you just don't notice it, or you don't get the lesson because you're blaming everybody else. So I try to help devotees, get over that so they can see the lessons. So the next question,
Prabhuji,
yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the devotees that we definitely want Mahatma Prabhu for the next session also. And that time we will be focusing on the importance of self-efforts in Krishna consciousness. So maybe if we want to reserve these questions for the next session.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, maybe you can answer this question, which is posted by Swati Mataji, and then maybe class we can have a separate
self-efforts, the value of self-efforts.
Yeah.
This is a good question. How do we practice? I like to look at practice like practicing an instrument. You remember when you first practice an instrument? Or practice a sport, or practice reading or writing. It's so unnatural. And unless you really like it and look forward to learning it, it's kind of like work. You just do it. And so we have the saying, practice makes perfect. So the simplest answer I can give you is, how do we practice, is that you go through the form. Like, how do I practice tolerance? I always tell devotees, when something bothers you, just say to yourself, that's interesting. That's how you practice tolerance. Like, I feel like screaming right now, but I'm just going to say, that's interesting. Within 3 days. You ever have something, you're like in line. Well, of course, in India, it happens every minute. You're in line and someone just goes in front of you, but it doesn't happen in the West. But if it happens in the West and you've been waiting in line a long time, you're finally at the front and someone just goes in front. You go, oh, that's interesting. It can be frustrating, but you just say, that's interesting. It doesn't mean you're not frustrated. It just means you're not going to act it out. So that's kind of what it means. Okay, maybe I'm not so humble, but can I act that way? Can I? Okay, I'll serve prasadam. I don't like serving anybody. That's my nature. I'm just selfish, proud person. I want everyone to serve me. But I think, okay, I'm going to serve prasadam, because that's a practice of some form of humility. And I serve the prasadam, and I think, these people, they don't even appreciate me serving. Why am I serving them? But still, I'm doing it because I'm supposed to. And by doing it, then gradually the mentality comes. The other night we were giving a class, and we were actually talking about this. And somebody said something really interesting. I really like this. They have these 12-step programs. It's for recovering from addictions. And part of the problem with addictions is people are helpless. On their own, they can't overcome them. And sometimes they don't want to overcome them because they're so weak. I mean, they want to overcome them, but they don't want to overcome them because they're so weak. They can't really overcome them. So he said in that movement of the 12-step movement, they say, just bring your body to the meetings and your mind will come. You know, your mind saying, I don't want to go, it's too hard, I don't want to do this. Just get your body there. You know, get your body in this group. We'll be talking about things that you really need to hear. So he's saying, you know, just get your body, your mind will follow later. So, you know, just act humbly. In the wake of that action, humility starts to develop. You know, act in a tolerant way. In the wake of your action, your tolerance becomes a little stronger. If, let's say, you're envious of a devotee, you think, oh, that devotee, they're getting all the fame, you know, they don't deserve it. Try to praise them. As hard as that could be, try to praise them. Do it with your body because your mind will follow. I really like that statement. I think we could all remember that. Just get your body there and your mind will follow. So that's the best answer I can give you. Sometimes there is no answer other than we just have to practice it no matter how difficult it is. Just like, you know, okay, Swati, get out there and, you know, walk 5 miles. Oh, I'm too tired. I don't feel like it. No, get out of the house. You know, okay, you know, you don't feel like walking. But, you know, your doctor said you have to. You put your running shoes on. You get out there kind of strolling. And, you know, after 20 minutes, you're walking pretty fast and you're feeling pretty good. Something like that, you know. Just get the body moving. That's just how it is. Get in the gym. Get your body in the gym and your mind will be okay later. Is that all right?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Try it. It works. I have experience. Oh, it's a good question. I like this question. Anandita. You mentioned the importance of stability in our material life because this will help in our spiritual life. Can material instability ever help our spiritual life, or is it always an impediment? Well, I wouldn't consciously create material instability, but sometimes material instability comes, and sometimes, yes, it does help our spiritual life because generally when things are difficult, it pushes us to, or can push us to Krishna. It can be an impetus. So, and Krishna says sometimes I do create instability in a devotee's life because that's what they need. And that goes into the other question of what do we learn from life situations, or should we learn? Well, Krishna creates situations where maybe there is instability so we could learn. Like with COVID, it was such a good lesson that there is instability in this world. So many people in America are dying. I just heard some crazy figure, like the way things are going in America, by next year you'll have like 300,000 people dying in 1 month. If I heard that correctly, I don't know. That sounds outrageous. But let's say that we're true. You know, we as devotees are always trying to preach, you know, you could die at any moment. Well, if 300,000, they said in January or February of next year, 300,000 Americans will die of COVID in that month. Well, that definitely makes it easier to preach that you could die at any moment, and there is stability, and the world is changeable, and so forth. And you need shelter. It's something spiritual. So yeah, in that sense, instability can help us. I thought COVID was a great teacher. Not that it was, it still is. So, but I don't think you have to go create instability. It will come. If it comes on its own, then learn from it. Use it as an impetus. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anandita. Anandita. Yes, I forgot to mention every morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 3 hours earlier than we started class today. Every morning we have class, so you're all welcome to come. It's on my Facebook page, HG Mahatma Das. And the classes are saved there. And we're talking now about Maya. That's the topic. It's a very interesting topic. To study Maya, Mahamaya, Yoga Maya, how she works. And yeah, I find it fantastic and really really helps us understand Prabhupada, because we go on these classes. The last class we did, the last topic was death. We went 3 months of just reading everything Prabhupada said about it. You really get a deep insight into how Prabhupada views something. So you really we'll get a good reference point of how Prabhupada has spoken about Maya. So you're all welcome to come for that. And if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see there are other programs on the weekends. You're all invited. If you like, you can come. And we have daily videos. You can, I guess, go to my YouTube page, get noticed, or the daily videos go up on Facebook. And I talk about things which I think are relevant. Things which I think are on devotees' minds that are not talked about so much in classes, but are important nevertheless. So I think you'll find those useful. Anything else, Prema Rasa?
Yes, Prabhuji. Actually, I was going to ask a question after the comment.
Okay.
So, we have discussed about all these virtues of being, able to cultivate all these qualities and all. But
Yes.
while practicing Krishna consciousness, we have, as we were discussing also, that Prabhupada said different things at different times. And, we have this statement by Srila Prabhupada that just chant 16 rounds, follow the regular principles, and in this life, you will go back to Godhead.
Yes,
And then there
yes.
are other statements where Prabhupada are completely purified. You cannot go back to Godhead.
Yes.
So I think devotees would like to know that this
Well,
is something that Prabhupada said.
Yes. Well, they're both true.
And I think, yeah. Like, now it's very interesting to see that when Prabhupada is saying just by chanting 16 rounds, following the regular principles, there is no mention of service, preaching,
Yes.
or anything else. Aparadhs also.
Yes.
On the other hand, when Prabhupada is making other statements, in general, Prabhupada writes that chant 16 rounds attentively, follow regular principles, read my books thoroughly, and avoid aparadhs, and you'll go back to Godhead like that.
Yes.
So basically, I think devotees would like to know that how do we take the first statement of Prabhupada, just chant 16 rounds and follow regular principles and go back to God? How can we reconcile with the other statements of Prabhupada?
Yeah, we definitely can reconcile. The first point is chant 16 good rounds. And follow the 4 regular principles, not just with your body, but with your mind also. So don't meditate on breaking them. Dream about breaking them. And so nobody should think when Prabhupada says chant 16 rounds, it's any kind of 16 round. And naturally, if you chant good rounds, you're going to read his book. You're going to want to read his books. It's a natural consequence. So I always took those statements that if you do that, you're naturally going to do all the other things because you'll be purified. And like you rightly said, but Prabhupada said about all these other things, you need to do all these other things. Which just makes sense to me that naturally you will do all these other things, because no one who's becoming purified doesn't read, doesn't study, doesn't serve like that, right? So it's kind of like saying, this is the foundation. If you have the foundation, everything's going to, well, this is the soil, maybe a better example. If you have this good soil, just put down this good soil, put your seed in it. Don't worry, it'll grow to be a tree. Does that mean you don't need water, you don't need sun? No, that's understood that you need that. But naturally, as the tree grows, it's growing because it's getting water and sun. You have to do that. So my concern is that people would think somehow or other I get 16 rounds done and somehow or other I follow the regular principles and everything's fine. No, it has to be without offense. It has to be sincere. It has to be wholeheartedly. And then your Krishna consciousness will sprout. When your Krishna consciousness sprouts, don't you think you're going to be hearing, serving, chanting, doing so many things? Of course. But it just underscores how powerful 16 rounds is, and 4 regular principles, how it's like from that everything comes. That's the way I understand it. And it's like the soil from which, you got this amazingly fertile volcanic soil, And that seed of bhakti is just going to sprout like crazy as long as you have that soil. And that soil is the 16 rounds, 4 principles. Good rounds, without offense. What I would, it doesn't make sense to think, it's like that T-shirt, what can I get away with and still go to heaven? That's not what Prabhupada means when he says chant 16, this is like all you have to do. You can get away with murder, but just do this. That's not what he means. I finished my 16 rounds. Okay, well, let's go whatever. Let's go play cricket today, the rest of the day. I got my rounds done. That's not what he means. He means that if you do it properly, then naturally you're going to do all the other things that he instructs. But if you don't do those 16 rounds, 4 regular principles, the other things won't help you sufficiently to go back to Godhead. That's my understanding. Is that okay, or you have a different understanding? Or an additional understanding?
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for that wonderful insight. I was actually thinking in terms of the Srila Prabhupada also. Just for example, sometimes it is mentioned in the Shastra that if you do certain activities, then you go back to God just by doing that activity, which the extreme glory, and it reveals the extreme glory of that particular devotional activity. So yes. Similarly, because Prabhupada said that Nityan Prabhu is unlimited, so this is also possible. But of course, it may be in a very specific context also at the same time.
I think it's a little different, because with those Shastric verses, it's kind of like, if you do this, you could go back to Godhead. Whereas Prabhupada's saying, if you chant 16 rounds, 4 principles, you will go back to Godhead. The other ones are like, results vary. That's the disclaimer. If you go to Rath Yatra, see Lord Jagannath, you'll be liberated. But there's a disclaimer, results vary. But without 16 rounds, 4 principles, there's no disclaimer. It's just, but we just have to add in the details so it's clear, That's the way I see it. Because those other verses, they basically say, it doesn't happen to everybody that sees Lord Jagannath. But everyone who chants 16 rounds offenselessly. But what does it mean to chant offenselessly? It will mean you'll have to be doing so many other things, right? You have to be Trinadapi Sunichena, right? And you'll have to have the right mentality and the service mood, and you'll be praying for service. So, obviously you're going to be doing service because you're praying for it. I think that's how we should understand it. All the good will be a byproduct of that. You will manifest all the qualities that you need to go back to Godhead. Whereas if you take Charnamrita or see Tulsi or Lord Jagannath, you could go back to Godhead, but you could not. Or you could go back into Godhead in a million lives. But with 16 rounds, 4 principles, Prabhupada was saying, this life. Don't wait for another one. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. Wonderful.
I think I need to go, because I think my voice is saying, don't talk anymore. I have to rest it for there's another class tonight.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the excellent class, and we look forward for your association as much as possible, and we wish and pray that you recover your voice quite quickly. Yes. So, if any devotee would like to greet Mahatma Prabhu.
Show your lotus face so I can see you. Turn your video on. We get to see all of you. I was just speaking to a blank screen, basically. There they are, real live people actually listening. Amazing. Sriji Sundari. Rajiv. Okay. I get the impression that some people when they listen to Zoom classes, are not in a presentable situation, so they don't turn their videos on. They're like in their pajamas, like laying down or something. Yeah. So they don't want to turn their camera on. So that's okay. That's okay. But
Yes,
if,
Prabhuji,
So
the
devotees, they have to unmute.
right here.
Yeah.
yeah, if you're presentable, you can present yourself before the court, and we can see you. Yeah. You know, because I see names, and I know like all kinds of Anuradhas and all kinds of other people, you know, so I don't know which one you are till I see you.
Prabhuji, Anuradha is my wife, Anand Vrindavan Devi Dasi.
Yes. I have a disciple named Anuradha also. I didn't know that was your name, Anuradha. That's a nice name. That's your birth given name, right? That's her birth name, Anuradha.
Yes, Prabhuji.
One who follows Radha. What a nice name. Yeah.
Prabhuji, I really liked your comment because she asked the question that how can we cultivate tolerance? And you said that if you want prema, then you have to have humility. So I think if she wants me, then she should have humility also.
Well, I always joke, but, you know, you want to learn tolerance, just get married. And if you want to learn high tolerance, have a lot of kids. You know, that's like, you know, it's, and then, you know, by the time you're old, you've tolerated everything. But just to live in Mumbai, you need a pretty high level of tolerance. It's so crowded. It's so polluted, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I once asked Borijan Prabhu, you know, I said, how do you become humble? He said, just live. He said, life will make you humble. You know, you'll get old and you're, you know, gray and wrinkled, your body will fall apart, you know, you'll be humbled by life. You'll make so many mistakes. Life will humble you, you know. Okay, I'm going to go. I think I'll have breakfast now. My 1 o'clock breakfast, yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for fabulous class, and we look forward to have you again and again.
Okay.
So please take care of your health.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll take it easy just for you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
The Prabhupada ki
Then what?
Yeah.
Honorable obeisances. The best of your feet, Prabhuji. All goes to Srila Prabhupada, all goes to you.
Hare Krishna.